Do you ever wonder why things don't always go your way, even though you're doing all the most important things the right way? Well, then this show's for you. Why do you coach? Welcome to the Nick Anthony Show. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Nick.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Is that
Getting
right?
over a little... Buddy? Yeah.
Yeah, is that all right? Call you buddy?
Pal bothers me. Yeah.
Charlie.
Yeah, pal. There's a few of them. I'm trying to think there's another one that I can't think of, but when someone says it, I feel I don't love it.
Yeah.
And it pretty much when somebody I know says anything, I'm kind of fine with it. Yeah.
So is that a hoodie?
It is. Yeah, I'm a big hoodie guy.
At least you don't have a sport coat on. I've noticed in sports that the sports commentators now, right? They're wearing hoodies and sports coats.
I'm clearly not a sports commentator. So
no, and we're not a sports commentator show.
Yeah, I'm trying to have some energy today. I'm getting over an illness, and so if I just slap me around if I die down a little bit. I'm trying to be a fountain.
So
what do we got today, Anth?
So I actually want to start by talking about the space shuttle.
Okay,
Challenge.
Let's do it.
So it's not a very nice story. It's a horrible bit. It was a long time ago, right? In 86, but still, I think there's lessons in the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And that is, basically it failed because there's, I'm just going to read part of this. It's 1/4-inch rubber O-ring stiffened by cold, failed to seal in under 1 second, and that was enough to destroy a 1.5 million pound spacecraft. So this thing goes on to say, so the O-ring is about the thickness of 2/4, and it knocked down something that was 184 feet tall, right? And so the reason I bring that up is because today's show is about the importance of details.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can do so many things right? And people think like, oh, I'm doing all the big things right, but still we're losing, or still I can't teach these players these things, or still people, whatever it is. But like we've said it before, I've said it before, and I hate all those things that you see on the internet saying that you do these 3 things, you become a zillionaire or whatever. You do these 10 things and you'll be a great CEO. It's like, nah, that's all baloney. There's like thousands and thousands of things. And that's why you always make fun of me for putting things in groups, but I think you can't process thousands of things. So you have to...
No, it helps me. Go ahead.
Right? But you have to group them up so you can tackle them, right? Whether it's PKE or something else, you have to group them in ways that your brain can assort them and start attacking them, or work through them. Attacking is probably too negative a word for a guy who's trying to be a fountain today. But I think that matters in sports a lot all the time, right? It's just details. I think people need to pay attention to the details.
Yeah, it's funny because this has become a I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say a pet peeve because that's not the right way to describe it, but I think it probably is a pet peeve that when details are not followed, or when perhaps results or a result in a specific moment or a specific game, match, race, whatever, is affected, where you can kind of tie it back to a detail, in my opinion. And again, it's weird when you and I talked about this and I thought about how details matter. A couple of words come to mind, and they may offshoot. One particular may offshoot into another show, but I think about habits. I think about standards in a way, although I think I flip my switch on that and don't think necessarily standards meet all the details. I think details work their way into underneath your standards. But I do think, and the other word is fundamentals. So I think they all kind of relate. So here's a detail. So as maybe previous or listeners have figured out that I was a goalie in lacrosse, right? And so when I was growing up, and so I talked about my father in helping me with fundamentals and footwork in a previous show. And I think I even may have mentioned my first goalie coach when I was in 7th grade. And he just taught me the simplest fundamental that became a detail for me for my entire career, which was your stick, the largest surface, that you're showing the shooter is perpendicular to the ground. So when you turn your stick slightly, you're not showing your entire stick to the shooter. And then it was, so it's perpendicular. And so that detail has always stuck with me. Right. And then he taught me 2 major things. And the other part was wherever one foot goes, the other foot goes, so it's basically a waltz, so when you are saving a ball, when you're moving to a ball, it's one foot and the other foot comes with you. It's basically like a follow through, if you're swinging a bat, if you're, swinging a golf club. And so those 2 details stuck with me. Okay. And so those, yes, they're fundamentals, right? But they're details that just laid a foundation for me. Okay. And I'll give you one more example where I really think is probably more, it's a detail and I think it shows, kind of where I think details play into games, right? So again, I'll go to the goalie example, that when shots, and you and I talked about this a little bit in water polo, and maybe some differences, but when I play lacrosse, if I got beat on the inside, which called the short side in hockey and lacrosse a little bit, if I got beat on a shot on the inside because I wasn't basically on the post, that was my fault, right? So, and that detail, you can get away with it. And I think that's where, like, a lot of things, when we started talking about this, I started thinking about, you get away with a lot of things, at times, with when you aren't following that detail. So every time I wasn't on the post, it's not like I got beat every time there, right? Sometimes I moved in time to save it, and sometimes the shooter missed. Sometimes the shooter didn't see it, right? But if I don't pay attention to that detail all the time, those are the moments that you lose games, that you give up a goal, whenever it is. And it's those details that if you follow it, you're fine. Like you've covered your bases and you've made, in this case, you've made the stop. But if it's that one time that you don't do it, that you get scored on, and then you lose a game. And it's only because you didn't follow the detail. It's not because your talent wasn't good enough. It's not because, the shooter was that good, right? It was, you didn't follow, you weren't detail oriented, and you weren't, the other word I guess I'll say, with the others I said is discipline, right? Are you disciplined enough to pay attention to a detail? So just those things popped into my head pretty quickly when we started talking about details.
And there's so many examples in sports, right? Like how many, you're going to keep bringing this up, but Tom Brady has how many Super Bowls that he's won?
7.
That was not a fountain.
No, that was not
a fountain. But one of them, I can't remember the guy's name. One of them against the Seahawks.
Russell Wilson?
Well, he was the quarterback.
Oh.
But
the defensive back.
The defensive guy who, oh my gosh, they just did a special on the last Super Bowl, but because it was Seahawks versus the Patriots again. But he totally read the route. It was right at the end of the game. Instead of handing the ball off to Marshawn Lynch, they passed the ball, and this guy knew the play.
Yep.
Basically, because he watched so much film, right? And he jumped the route, and he got an interception, and that guaranteed Tom Brady's one of his 7 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
So, so it's not just even, it's just that guy on his own cared about details. Saw this other thing the other day where apparently Dennis Rodman used to be, he was for people who don't know, he was a great rebounder. That's really what he did in the NBA during his career. He was just all about rebounding, right? And he would count people's rotations off the ball after they released the ball. He would, in warm up, he would watch and count the rotations before the ball hit the rim. So he knew when so-and-so was shooting, it was 3.5 rotations or 4.5 or whatever it was. And that helped him with his rebounding. But imagine being so detail oriented that instead of warming up, your idea of warming up is to sit and watch and count the rotations of the ball.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is. And then, and we just, and, our audience, we do record these shows. They're like 2 months or so, at least a month. So we just finished watching the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. And by the time this comes out, maybe we'll be on the Summer Olympics, but the Winter Olympics. And you think about the 2 gold medal hockey games, right? They really couldn't have been closer, right? Overtime games. And to get overtime, it's, that means the game could have gone really either way. And think about all the details that they had to do in order to have even a chance to win.
Yeah.
And if they missed any of those details, they wouldn't have gotten overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it could have gone either way, even in overtime. But actually, I don't know if that's true. I'm not enough of a hockey fan to say that I know. But I do know that if it's a tie game at the end of the regulation, it was close. And everybody is paying attention to the details. Any detail could have won the game another way.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think you're completely accurate in saying that a detail either way at any time.
Right.
I mean, we're, when it comes to the U.S. hockey, the men especially, because we hadn't won since Miracle on Ice, we're talking about it, and we're talking about all the things, all the feel-good stories and everything like about that game and about that team. One little detail doesn't happen, or one break. I mean, let's talk about not even details, just one flip of the puck or something, 1 inch of the goalie stick
doesn't do his job.
And it's the other way, and we're kind of like, what's wrong with U.S. hockey? I mean, that's kind of what sports is, and that's why I think the thing to think about for coaches is oftentimes details don't show themselves until you don't show them, right? I mean, or you don't do it. So like I said about the kind of the goalie example, right, for me, but what I guess I can't emphasize enough how much you have to pay attention to those little moments. So I'll give you another I'll give you another example of a detail that personally drives me crazy. And by the way, I think there's a larger scale that we'll get into in a little bit, which is like details of not necessarily the specific play or the fundamental, but just the details of almost like a team or a program, right? That coaches would want to emphasize that can influence culture. But back on the fundamental thing, one of the things that drives me crazy is when basketball, when they run plays, so the handoff has become a big play in basketball. I mean, kind of an action. It's not even a play. It's just an action in basketball where someone's handing the ball off. And the number of offensive fouls because they're moving screens drives me crazy, because it's just a detail. That's all it is practice. Like every day is your feet have to be set. The guy coming off the screen has to wait a second. And that is a turnover. That is a big play in a game. That's a detail, right? Easier said than done from me from the sidelines, in those moments. But your detail and those aspects have to show up, have to be good enough that they show up under pressure, right? That you're disciplined enough each day to talk about and to emphasize those details that they can show up under pressure and not just skeleton offense running through the drills. But if you don't correct it or hold people to the standard of that during those base drills in practice, it's not going to translate to games.
Right.
I'll
pull this even back to PKE. And for the people who haven't watched episode 1, PKE is, again, physical knowledge and then emotions. And I would say E is a big bucket, right? There's a lot in there, characteristics, traits, and all that kind of stuff. But it's also, you need players and you need assistant coaches, you need head coaches, you need everybody who values the importance of details, right? Who really take the time to care about that. And we talked about even the 4 stages of competence, getting to the point to where you're unconsciously competent. Well, that takes a lot of attention to details all the way through, right? To get to the point to where you've practiced it so much that you can do it without thinking about it. But the only way to get there is to be the kind of person that cares about details.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a college coach and you're recruiting somebody, are you finding out whether this person cares about details or not?
Mm-hmm.
Not just do they like practice, but can they do the things over and over and over again until they get to the point to where it's second nature, or not second nature, like you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Unconsciously competent.
Unconsciously incompetent. Amazing. Like we have a label for that. And I heard something the other day too. Steph Curry, right? He shoots apparently an incredible number of shots every single day. He's like Kobe Bryant. He goes in ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know the number?
I don't know the number, but he's the greatest shooter of all time. I hope it's.
But so you would think, but you would think somebody who's been in the league as long as he has all the success he has, he might become complacent or think, oh, of course, I'm the greatest shooter of all time, as you just said, right? I don't need to practice. But yet he still practices. He still pays attention to the details all the time.
Yeah.
500 shots per day off season.
500 shots a day off season.
On 250 300 shots per day.
Yeah. So I don't know if the audience heard that or not, but somewhere between 500 during off season and 200 in season, he shoots every single day. He practices, even though he's the greatest shooter ever.
Yeah, that's why he is the greatest shooter ever.
But that's exactly right. But so many people blow past that, especially even like high school kids that have some level of success. They think they're, the alpha, as you've said in another show, you called somebody an alpha, right?
Yep.
And they're great at that level, right? And then they get to the point where they're complacent, and then all of a sudden they can't make it to the next level because they don't have the consistency in training. When they have to pick up a new skill, they don't have the emotional discipline, to use your word again, to keep working and working at it, right?
Yeah.
And it shows up, like you said, it shows up in a game, and it shows up in situations in very bad spots if you don't have that attention to details. One example, I hate to bring this up, but I will bring it up. I'll bring it up, but I hate to bring it up because it's about marathon swimming, and it's about me in particular. But the first time I swam the English Channel, I'd been training for 3 years. I had, I was physically ready to do it. I knew how to parallel, but I knew a ton of stuff, right? And I was emotionally strong enough, all that kind of stuff. I was ordered out of the water a half mile from shore, even though I still contend to this day I could have made it to France.
We'll be right back to the Nick Anthony Show.
Today's show is brought to you by the book, Creating and Evaluating Opportunities. Evaluating potential investment, considering an employment opportunity, finally starting that company you have been thinking about. This book is for you. Available on Amazon. Creating and Evaluating Opportunities.
Welcome back to the Nick Anthony Show.
So imagine swimming all through the night, swimming for, 12 and a half hours or whatever it was, and then being ordered out of the water when I'd done all the big things right.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't do, right, and it's impossible to do once you're in the water, once you're in the game,
Yep.
too late,
Yep.
right?
100%.
Whether the game is basketball or water polo or whatever it is, sometimes it's too late to do something in game to take care of a detail. What I didn't do was make sure everybody in the boat, that there was a hierarchy to make decisions. And so there was chaos on the boat that I didn't even know what was going on, right? So the way it works, right, the boat's here, you're over here, you don't know what's going on in the boat in the English Channel. Other swims are, you're close enough, the boats are smaller, you can, but not in the English Channel. You just can't communicate with the boat. And so I thought everything was good. Everybody on the boat thought everything was bad. And once you get an order from the captain to get out, you have to get out or you get a lifetime ban, right? So I had to get out, even though it was fine. So, yeah, all the big picture stuff I took care of. I didn't take care of one little detail, and it cost me.
Well, yeah, I think that's, as I've said multiple times, I think the English Channel has so many of our lessons that, that are so appropriate for so many of our topics. But I think that in particular is a really good one, because when you explained it to me, you used the word detail a lot.
Yeah.
That exactly what you just said. You had handled so many things on the, maybe just above detail. And some of it was detail. I mean, don't get me, it wasn't every detail but that really kind of shows the level of detail that was needed to accomplish that. So really good example. I also think coaches need to think about, what do they want their team, their athlete, if it's an individual, to be, and what are those most important details, right? Yes, we're talking about in this, and going back to my example, is just that specific, kind of fundamental of being a goalie. But like, what do they want their team, what details want to represent their mission, their core values, et cetera? I'll give you an example. It's like, if you're a team first type of coach, and that's, and hopefully you want that. Maybe you're a coach that wants some individuality, right? I see that a lot in shoes, and where coaches have grown to allow their players to pick their color shoes, right? So they're uniform throughout, and their shoes, so they've, in essence, they've given that permission that detail isn't worth the individuality, right? But then you also have the coaches in the detail of, we're all going to wear a polo and khakis when we travel as a team.
Right.
That's the detail that, and if you don't meet that standard, you aren't hitting our detail, and that matters. When I travel with teams and when I see teams, and it's, what do they look like at a meal? Are we allowing them to have a headphone in? These are discipline things, and I have my views, and they're probably going to come out, but it'll be pretty obvious. But but are we allowing them to have their phones? Is the meal a business and a detail item? And then, hey, once you break the team meal, you can go. I think those are, again, what do those details matter, like in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, right? And I think that you have to, as a coach, think about them. And you also, I think, because some of the conversations I've had with coaches is, Nick, I got to pick my battles. I can't be all over them about everything. And that's a good eye opener for me, right? Because it's easier for me to sit back and say, yes, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And it multiplies into discipline, right? Across your team. But what happens is now you have a bunch of robots. And so I think it is picking the spots of what details that almost influence other details, right? So one of the things, again, that drives me crazy in lacrosse is when people catch and throw with their inside hand to their defense, right? So if I'm running right and I'm throwing left, right, my defender's here, right? And he may not be on me. But if I can't learn to throw the ball right-handed going to my right, and I'm just catching the ball and just throwing it, when I get pressure, all of a sudden, now I have to put it in my right hand, and can I do that? Right. Or am I just catching and not moving my feet? It's those, so coaching that habit, that detail, where does that influence other things, right? And that's where I think is something for coaches to think about is, okay, what are those details that I'm going to harp on that will influence other details, that it is known that we are detail oriented without me having to pick apart every little thing that is done, right? Because I do think that comment to me, like, hit me when a coach kind of came back at me saying, like, I can't be all over them everything.
Right. I think, right. And I go back to the conversation we had with Chris Spates here on the show, and he talked about the freedom to let him play.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know lacrosse, right? But my bet is that he's taught every player he's ever had to be able to pass with both hands, or throw. What do you call it? Throw or pass?
It's really, yes, throw, pass, whatever. You can, either one. Yeah.
Changeable. Okay. But I'm sure he taught him to do it with both hands because that's important. But I also think, but so along those lines, I think I agree with the coach to push back on you.
Yeah.
In my opinion, right, the details matter, but it's not every detail that matters. You have to not major on a minor. Like if I was so focused on giving the crew, I'm going to go back to if I'd just been so focused on managing the crew on the boat that I didn't do my training, that I didn't learn how to parallel. I didn't do all the big stuff, the important stuff, the major stuff. I still would have failed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'll go back to. I mean, I'm going to pull business in if I can. Right? There's so many business plans I've seen that the big stuff is all there. Right? They've got an innovative product. They've got a marketplace that they know that's there. They have a unique value proposition. They have protection around the idea, right? That makes them protected, all that kind of stuff. But then their business plan doesn't include things like, or even their plan. Forget whether it's in the book that they share with in potential investors and that kind of stuff. But they haven't thought through, can I compensate the sales guys enough if it's a salesperson kind of driven thing to make them care?
Yeah.
Right. And is there enough money in there to make them care? Do I figure out the sales guy's comp plan? Right. Because you can have all the big giant stuff done, but if you didn't take care of the sales guy's person's comp plan, right, you're still going to fail. So, but am I worried about in my business plan what kind of shoes my sales guys were? Not at that point, right? That doesn't. It might matter, right? If your sales guy shows up with holes in his shoes for an in-person sales call, that might not work. But you get my point, right? There's some of the details don't matter as much as other details. So it does, you have to major on the majors.
Yep.
But some of the details are majors too, right?
Yeah.
You can't major on the minors.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, just even thinking about it even more as we're talking, as what coaches go through, and the time to be in the minors really is in the off seasons, when you're really trying to get your fundamentals, you're trying to get better, you're harping on it and being really process driven over outcome. Right. So if you're trying to do a certain fundamental or a skill that relates to the details you want to be as a team, you may not be that good at it. Right. You're probably not going to be good at it if you're really having to harp because you're not unconsciously competent about it. You're going to turn them from into unconsciously incompetent, into consciously incompetent, and then move your way into unconsciously incompetent. But
that's part of what the Chris Bates conversation.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's part of what he's like. I'm going to teach them all these things now, so then they have the freedom to play the way they know to play. But they need to know how to.
Correct, and then that time to do it is like those times in the off season, and when you're, as an athlete, you can work on it yourself, but you need to know what those details are, and you may not be good at it, and it's that uncomfortable, way of doing it that then translates when you do get into kind of season mode, and to your point, you can't get into every detail and major in the minors at that point. You have to be falling back on your training. The training is the detail. And you can see it. I mean, there's a reason teams lead the league in penalties, right? There's a reason teams, lead the league in turnovers, or and the opposite. The reason teams shoot well at foul shots. The reason teams, turn the ball over the least. You can see it, right? Details matter in the way you warm up, right? I mean, I see teams, one in particular in my head. They're a passing, cutting kind of team. They are, less dribble, more pass, more cut, and that's the way they warm up. Their warm ups are passing, are cutting, are shooting from in those manners. So like you have to tie those drills, those warm-ups, those details to the way you want to play. They talk to each other. There's no mystery, right? If you hold people to the details, of certain aspects, and I don't know every sport and the way they work, but going back to football, like there's a reason you lead the league in penalties. You as a coach have to own that and take responsibility for that. Whatever details in practice that you need to coach and not allow to happen,
Right.
and hold them to, you have to do it, right? I mean, so.
Right. And I agree with you. Right. You're talking about the warm-up piece, right? I was talking to a coach right before a game a couple of weeks ago, and their warm-up opportunity came, right? It was a series of games. And I was just like, I'll let you go. I know you need to go run warm-ups. Like, no, my players don't know how to run warm-ups on their own now. I'm in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And his attitude, and he kept talking to me, and his attitude is like, who knows what I need to take care of before a game? So I need to make sure that the team knows how to run their own warm-up without me.
Yep.
And because there's no assistant coach in this sport, that sport at that day, at that time, right? And so that was a detail that he worked through like countless times, right? So they knew exactly what they were supposed to do. So I'd say he paid attention to details. And, I know that the top, programs and that kind of stuff, they want you all looking a certain way, especially in colleges still, and, that kind of stuff. But I look at the pros now, right? They all walk in like they're not all dressed the same. They're dressed in all kinds. Some are more relaxed and some are very formal and all that kind of stuff. But I've seen it where I've seen in a youth sport, I'm thinking of one particular coach who emphasizes so much the team looks the same. But in his case, I think that's majoring on a minor, actually. I get it that it's really important, right? But there's other things that are more important. And that stuff it spends more time on how they look than on how they play. And you know what I mean? So it's like, so details matter, and you have to have the ability to really sit and evaluate everything. But to blow past the details and be unconsciously incompetent around the details, that's when I think you get in trouble.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
no doubt. I really, even as we talk about this, I would love to hear from coaches which details matter to them.
Right.
And then how do they translate to what they're trying to be as a team, as a coach, as a culture, whatever they're doing, and how do they evolve over time? Like even with having Chris Bates on, there's details that it seems like he didn't have to worry about because of his leadership and the program, and he has the ability as a pro coach and GM to have players for multiple years, and they're adults, obviously, and he can, kind of rely on those details. Now he has to obviously keep evaluating them,
right.
But there are details about the way they operate as a team, as a program, as an organization that kind of, manifest itself and keep going. And so I would love really, in this, because I think there are the fundamentals, as I said, and those minute details, especially in the off season and things that translate. But I also think there's those larger cultural things that where the details matter, and being on time is a simple one, right? I mean, I saw something the other day where someone listed, Mike Krzyzewski listed the team rules they had in the Olympics with Kobe and LeBron and Durant, and they had a conversation and they came up with like 10 standards that they were going to live by. And they weren't really, I wouldn't say they're details, right? They're kind of standards, but it turns out like if you put them up next to, and I have to try to find the graphic, if you put them next to kindergarten rules, they're very similar.
Right.
Like respect each other, look each other in the eye, be on time, like all these things.
Right.
It's pretty funny. But I think overall, I just think what we're getting at today and maybe in trying to wrap up is I would love to hear what details coaches use and emphasize when they do it, how they do it. And then, in relating in what are those things that they don't, that they maybe they deem as minor.
Right.
And how they balance what details from individuality and stuff. Because I think it all affects each other.
And before we wrap up, I'm gonna
Nope,
back to
we're done. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
that guy that you said pushed back on you, right?
You love this pushback. We've used this a few times. Go ahead.
Yeah, in other shows too.
Yes.
But I think a core message I think out of this is know all the details, and some you may choose not to. So he pushed back on you. He thought about the detail.
Or she. But go ahead.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I think I said he. Go
I
ahead.
think you did too, but I don't know. But that person had thought about the details and decided it wasn't worth doing. The squeeze wasn't worth the juice, right?
Yep.
But that's still a coach's job, is to think about those thousands of things. And some you might say, yep, I'm going to let that go. But make sure you're thinking about all the details and then deciding to have a plan about those things, right? So, and then I think that includes making sure you're surrounded by people, assistant coaches, players, everybody who appreciate your decisions around details, like which details are important. And maybe they need an explanation. Maybe you need to talk to them. Maybe you need to tell them why they're important. That's all okay, right? That's part of the shortest distance between two people is never a straight line kind of thing. But that's really important. You can't run a good team if some people care about the details and some people don't.
Yep.
Right?
So, and I think lead into another show, and I've had this on my brain. I don't even know how much I've shared it with you over time, but it's just habits and how it relates to habits.
Well, and right. So the habits to tackle those details leads to unconscious incompetence, which is episode 3.
Yep.
So.
Fantastic.
All right, Nick.
Good talk.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. See you.
Bye. Thanks for watching the show today. I had a great time talking with Nick, as I always do. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Visit us on social media. Also, go to our website if you've got comments, questions, you want to call me an ugly name, thenickanthonyshow.com. There's a place to do it there. Give us your email address so you never miss an episode. Thank you very much. We'll see you next show.